Crawford sent a trainee to me.
Yes, I'm a student. I'm here to learn from you. Maybe you can decide for yourself whether or not I'm qualified enough to do that.
Yay! Serial killers! One of the things that consoles us when we read horror fiction is that we can put the book down and walk away saying, phew, thank God that monster's not real. Something many people must still do while reading The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. Well, today we want to give you a top 10 list that reassures you that while Hannibal Lecter may be fiction, there are many like him who were not. Hey everyone, it's Raechel Fisher once again here to review our top 10 list of real people scarier than Hannibal Lecter. Number 10, Jack the Ripper. Starting off number 10 with one of the most infamous murderers in history, Jack. Jack the Ripper plagued the minds of investigators for centuries, actually. He committed 5 gruesome murders in 1888 in and around London's Whitechapel area. He taunted police with mysterious letters and has been the hot topic of news stories for over 120 years. Some believe he was part of a conspiracy to do with Queen Victoria, others that he was just simply an insane man. Part of the reason he was so terrifying is that beyond the regular murders, it was more sociopathic and hateful than anyone could understand at the time. I mentioned in a video a while back that they may have solved who the murderer was in 2019. DNA evidence found on the silk scarf of Catherine Eddowes, Jack's 4th victim, identified Polish barber Aaron Kosminski as Gentleman Jack. Splattered blood and semen were found on the shawl, and the DNA was matched to a descendant of Kosminski. Though some scientists still say the evidence is insufficient to officially declare Kosminski as the infamous murderer, that was the closest authorities ever got to catching him. Number 9, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy put a face to the killer clown. I can't even begin to imagine the horror of discovering what was the real John Wayne Gacy. He was a father, a husband with a very dark secret. The first time he was arrested was in 1968 for committing heinous assault on 2 teenage boys, but was released after 18 months for good behavior. Regardless of his past, Gacy adopted the persona of Pogo the Clown, delighting his community with entertainment. Everyone loved him, and families trusted him, but somehow Gacy got away with destroying the lives of family after family, brutalizing 33 boys, hiding the bodies in his very home. He received the death penalty in 1994, but the fact that he left jail in the first place just goes to show the issues with the criminal justice system around that time. Number 8, Robert Pickton. Presumably, if you're watching this video, you're a true crime fan, and you've probably watched the episode of Criminal Minds. I think it's Criminal Minds, is it? Let me know. Inspired by Pickton. For anyone who thinks Canadians are always nice, not true. Canadian serial killer Robert Pickton owned a pig farm, which he used to his sick advantage. Police initially began a search on his property when they heard about illegal firearms, but soon they began to discover discarded items from women who had gone missing. For instance, an inhaler, an old shoe, and a few more pieces that led to one of the most horrifying murder cases in history. Pickton confessed to the murder of 49 women and said he wanted to make it an even 50 but got sloppy and therefore was caught. Many of the remains were not found due to the fact that he presumably fed the remains to his pigs and even ground up and added the meat to ground pork, which he distributed to family and friends. Anthropologists brought in 2 massive conveyor belts to help sift through dirt in order to find any evidence of the missing women. Pickton was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole, which is the most severe sentence in the Canadian judicial system. Number 7, ANDREI CHIKATILO. ANDREI CHIKATILO was a Soviet serial killer who developed an addiction to killing, stating that stabbing women was the only way he could, get ready, receive sexual satisfaction. Like most terrifying serial killers, he was just like everyone else. ANDREI worked as a trusted school teacher, all while committing over 50 murders of young people before he was caught. He was able to get away with it for so long due to the USSR covering up potential serial murders, as murder was not supposed to exist under Stalin. At the time of his birth, Stalin's agricultural policies caused widespread hardship and famine. His early childhood was affected by this, and not only that, ANDREI was believed to have suffered from water on the brain at birth, causing him to get frequent UTIs and often wet his bed. He was often the subject of bullying due to the fact that his father was captured during World War II and was ridiculed for his cowardice. Though we can be sympathetic towards his childhood upbringing, we cannot be towards his crimes. He was a truly awful man, and ANDREI was arrested in the 1990s and sentenced to death. Number 6, the Green River Killer. Like PICKTON, Gary Ridgway was convicted of 49 murders, however, those are only the confirmed cases. Evidence suggests that the number is over 75. The Green River Killer is one of America's most prolific killers because of that reason. During the 1980s to 1990s, women were warned to stay away from Route 99, South King County, Washington, but still, this stretch was often occupied by runaways and prostitutes, and those that didn't pay attention to the warnings often paid the price. He is one of the reasons parents tell their children not to help someone who's looking for their lost dog or have candy in their truck. Gary would lure women by showing them a picture of his son before strangling them in his home and then moving them towards a forest location. Though Ridgway claimed to be a religious man, he had a weak spot for women of the night. Sadly, some of his victims have still never been found, though authorities have uncovered some since his trial. Number 5, Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez earned the name Monster of the Andes, though it's in no way a title to celebrate. His early life in Colombia was rife with homelessness, violence of many kinds, and was incarcerated in his early adult life. But he should have never been let go. His crimes spanned across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Pedro was convicted of killing 110 young women, though the estimate is over 300. It seems that Pedro's crimes could have ceased a lot sooner than they did. In the 1970s, he was caught by the Ayacucho community when he attempted to kidnap a young girl. They were going to submit him to tribal law and bury him alive until a Western missionary convinced them that he should be handed over to the Peruvian police. He was then deported back to Colombia, where his crimes began again. He continued to kill, many families resorting to hunting him down themselves, and he was finally caught once again by Carolina Ramon and her peers when he tried to lure her daughter away during the market. Lopez was incarcerated in 1981 for just 16 years after being diagnosed as a sociopath, and then he was released, and his whereabouts are unknown today. Good job, guys. Number 4, Dennis Rader, aka the BTK Killer. True crime doc fans know this name very well. He is another man who, like Jack the Ripper, loved the notoriety of his crimes. The BTK killed at least 10 people between 1974 and 1991, baffling the police in Wichita, Kansas. BTK stands for Bind, Torture, and Kill, which sadly describes the pattern of his crimes. At night, he may have been a murderer, but during the day, like others on this list, Rader was a devoted family and businessman. After killing his last victim in 1991, Rader went off the map, baffling police even more, making them think he had disappeared. But then, in 2004, around the anniversary of the Otero family, he resurfaced, sending more clues to police, literally handing them proof on a floppy disk that led them to his church. It still wasn't until 2005 he was finally arrested and given 10 life sentences to be served in El Dorado Correctional Facility, and he's still there. Stay there, buddy. Number 3, Richard Trenton Chase, also known as the Vampire Killer of Sacramento, and you can already start to guess why. Chase claims 6 known victims during his life of crime and was a devoted cannibal. He was infamous for drinking the blood of his victims, even mixing it with Coca-Cola at times. Ugh! The signs of what was to come were abundant in his early childhood. He would often wet the bed and delight in drinking the blood of small animals, and every true crime fan knows what comes next. He was in and out of mental institutions most of his life and developed hypochondria from his addiction to hard drugs and alcohol. He was convinced that someone had stolen his main arteries and that his blood was turning into powder. He continued to hunt animals, consuming them raw, and once he was found in a field covered in cow's blood. But of course, he graduated to bigger game, and I can't even say what he did to the victims. It was gruesome, guys. Awful. The police eventually got a lead when a girl he went to high school with ran into him, noticing his sunken appearance and blood on his shirt. He was finally caught and tried to plead insanity. The court denied the claim, which I honestly find is weird because he obviously was insane. But Chase was found dead in his cell from an OD on medication he was given while in prison. Honestly, good riddance, man. Number 2, Delphine LaLaurie. Comment down below if you're a fan of American Horror Story. That show is built on shock factor, but man, there were episodes in Coven about Delphine LaLaurie that I actually couldn't stomach. I don't even think I can finish it yet. This woman was vile, to say the least. On April 10th, 1834, a fire at the LaLaurie mansion broke out in New Orleans, leading to a stomach-churning discovery. Rescuers found a 70-year-old black woman chained to the stove while LaLaurie was trying to save the furniture. She was the one who set fire to the house in order to escape the torture Delphine inflicted on her and others in the house. She She led them to the attic, and what authorities found was a kind of medieval evil they had no idea hid behind one of the wealthiest women in town. 7 slaves were tied with spiked iron collars. Lalaurie had been accused of the mistreatment of slaves before when she chased a young girl off a balcony. She was forced to sell her slaves but snuck them back in when she made her family buy them so she could keep them. After the torture chamber was discovered, a town mob gathered around the house protesting that something had to be done about the devil woman, but she never faced any real punishment for her crimes, only death by reputation. She was ruined in society. Boo-hoo. That's honestly one thing about American Horror Story's Coven season that was satisfying, that for one moment, we got to imagine that she did get her comeuppance. Number 1, Alfredo "Balli" Trevino. Last but not least, we have the man that actually inspired the character of Hannibal Lecter, Alfredo "Balli" Trevino. For years, people believed that Hannibal Lecter wasn't based on any real monster. They had theories, but they weren't sure. Thank goodness though, but then Thomas Harris finally revealed in 2013 that this was actually not the case. Trevino was a doctor in Mexico who was awaiting a death sentence in prison for murdering and then chopping up his gay lover. Harris became acquainted with Dr. Trevino in the 1960s while working for an American pulp fiction magazine. He was tasked with interviewing another prisoner named Dykes Askew Simmons. Simmons had tried to escape prison and was shot by a guard in his attempt. Trevino performed life-saving emergency surgery on him, and when Harris heard the story, man, he needed to know more about this guy. After a fight, Trevino sedated his partner, slit his throat in a bath, and then methodically chopped up his body. He drove to a neighbor's farm to bury the evidence in a box, but when workers noticed a suspicious grave the next day, an investigation sparked, leading to his arrest. Harris was struck by the man's grace, which reminds us of a certain fictional charismatic murderer. Remarkably, Trevino was released and continued his medical practice, saving lives of the poor until he died. So, I don't know, I guess some good came from evil, but it still inspired one of literature's most terrifying villains, so what do you think, guys? And that was yet another top 10 terrifying list. You know you can't get enough of this, so make sure to smash that like button. Let us know in the comments what dark curiosities you'd like us to review. Maybe dark tourist spots, let us know. If we get over 4,000 likes, just maybe we'll do another. I've been your host, Raechel Fisher, and until next time, take care and stay safe.